I never imagined there was something she was keeping from me. Have you ever suspected someone you loved, only to discover that you were completely wrong?
Yeah.
That was what happened to me when I discovered my wife had been cooking a second pot every evening. My wife and I did not have much, but we were happy with the little we had. We worked hard, shared our meals, and believed our home had no secrets. My wife was a hard-working woman. She cared for our home and always made sure nobody went hungry. I never imagined there was something she was keeping from me. The first time I noticed it, I thought it was nothing. My wife had started cooking with 2 pots instead of 1. One pot was always placed on our table, but the second pot was different. She always moved it away before I could see inside. At first, I told myself not to worry, but every night, the same question came back to my mind. What was inside that second pot? I later discovered I was not the only person who noticed. The village had started asking questions about my wife's second pot. Sometimes a small thing becomes a big problem when people start adding their own stories. And slowly, I began listening to voices that were not my own. I did not know what my wife was hiding, but I was determined to find out who that second pot was really meant for. My wife never changed her routine. One pot always stayed for our dinner. The other always disappeared before I asked about it. I kept telling myself every marriage deserves trust. So I buried my questions and chose silence instead. But silence has a way of creating even louder questions. The more I ignored it, the more I thought about that second pot. My mind had already begun creating answers of its own.
Nothing had happened between us, but somehow, the peace inside our home no longer felt the same to me.
I began paying attention to every little thing I had ignored before. Then one evening, I noticed something I had never seen before. My wife wrapped the second pot carefully before leaving the kitchen. That was the night I made up my mind. If the truth would not come to me, I would quietly go looking for it. The next evening, I decided not to ask any questions. I wanted to see everything exactly as it happened. Everything looked completely normal. She prepared dinner the same way she always did. Then, just as I expected, she placed the second pot on the fire once again. We finished eating together like every other night. But this time, I was not ready to sleep.
My wife stepped out of the house carrying the second pot. She looked around carefully before walking away.
I followed quietly. I stayed far enough that she would never know I was behind her. She did not take the road toward the market. She did not walk towards any neighbor's compound either.
She kept walking until we reached the far end of the village. I had never seen her come this way before.
She stopped in front of a small hut. My wife knocked gently on the wooden door. A few moments later, someone slowly opened it. It wasn't another man. It was an elderly woman I had never seen before. My wife handed her the second pot with both hands. The old woman received it with a grateful smile. They hardly spoke to each other, but everything they did showed they had known each other for a long time.
But one question still remained unanswered.
I waited until she started walking home. I followed quietly, carrying more questions than answers. I could not sleep that night. I kept wondering who that lonely woman really was. Morning came, but my mind was still at that lonely hut. I knew I could no longer keep this to myself.
For the first time, I decided I would ask my wife about the second pot.
I thought I was finally about to hear the truth. I never imagined her answer would change the way I saw kindness forever.
I asked her one question. Who is the woman that receives the second pot every night?
My wife became quiet. And in that silence, I realized there was a reason she had kept everything hidden.
She told me the woman in that hut was not a stranger. She was someone who helped her when nobody else was there.
Before I met my wife, she went through a very difficult time. That woman was the only person who gave her food and shelter. My wife told me she made a promise many years ago.
Thank you, my dear. You are welcome, Mama.
She promised that woman she would never allow her to suffer alone. Then I understood why she never told me. She was not hiding wrongdoing. She was protecting someone's dignity. I had allowed suspicion to speak louder than trust. I jogged my wife before knowing the full story. But do you think my wife was right to have kept such information secret from me?